The first thing she felt was the cold. Dampness seeped through her skin, crawling up her spine until it settled in her chest like a block of ice. Her eyelids were heavy, but when she finally forced them open, the darkness swallowed her whole. A single dim bulb flickered overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow across concrete walls. The smell of mildew and dust made her throat tighten, and then she realized her wrists and ankles were bound tightly to a chair. Panic struck her like a wave. She tried to move, but the ropes dug into her flesh. Her breathing quickened. Where was she? Why was she here? Her mind scrambled through fragments of memory, desperate for clarity. She remembered waking early that morning, helping her daughter with her final wedding preparations, the joy and nerves blending together as the day they had dreamed of finally arrived. She remembered the delicate white dress, the veil hanging in her daughter's room, the excitement that filled the air, and then nothing. A shadow in the hallway, a strong hand on her shoulder. The sharp, dizzying sting of something pressed against her face, and now this. Her ears adjusted before her eyes did, and she froze. From somewhere above her, faint and muffled, came the sound of music, strings, soft laughter, footsteps echoing on polished floors. A piano melody carried through the ceiling beams. It was unmistakable. It was the wedding, her daughter's wedding. Her chest tightened as the truth clawed at her heart. She was missing it, locked away like a criminal, like some dangerous secret to be hidden. She fought against the ropes with all her strength, but the knots only cut deeper into her skin. Her throat burned as she screamed, "Help! Somebody help me!" But the basement walls swallowed her voice whole. For a moment, despair washed over her. The child she had raised, the daughter she had loved and protected all her life, was walking into a trap upstairs while her mother was trapped in a cold, forgotten room beneath it all. She could hear the faint clatter of glasses, the hum of conversation, the swell of a string quartet. The wedding was already underway. Her eyes darted across the dim room, searching for anything that might help. A stack of dusty boxes, an old cabinet, spiderwebs stretched across corners, and then she froze again because another sound had joined the music. Footsteps. They were heavy, deliberate, echoing down the narrow staircase. She held her breath as the door creaked open at the top of the stairs. A silhouette appeared, broad shoulders, tall frame. She would know that figure anywhere. Her son-in-law. He descended slowly, the smirk on his face illuminated as the dim light caught him. Her blood turned to ice. "You should have stayed quiet," he said, his voice smooth, almost casual, as though he weren't standing in front of her on her daughter's wedding day, keeping her bound like a prisoner. "I warned you, didn't I? But you just couldn't keep your mouth shut." Her heart pounded. "How dare you? You can't do this. This is my daughter's wedding. She deserves to know who you really are." He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing with menace. "No, what she deserves is happiness. And you were about to ruin that, all because you can't let go, all because you think you know best. But not today." Her voice trembled as anger and fear collided inside her. "You're already married. You have children in another state. Do you think I don't know? Do you think she'll forgive you when she finds out?" His jaw tightened, and for the first time, the charm he wore like a mask cracked. His eyes turned dark, sharp with the kind of fury that made her stomach twist. He leaned down, his voice low and venomous. "She won't find out. Not today. Not ever. Because you'll stay right here, where no one can hear you." She shook her head violently, her tears spilling down her cheeks. "You can't hide the truth forever. I will get out of here. She will know what kind of man you are." He straightened, brushing invisible dust from his tailored suit. The music upstairs swelled, and the sound of applause trickled down through the floorboards. He smiled coldly. "By the time anyone even thinks about looking for you," he said, "it'll be too late. She'll already be mine, and you'll just be another bitter woman locked away in the dark." With that, he turned and ascended the stairs, the door creaking shut behind him. The lock clicked into place, sealing her in. She was left in silence, the muffled echoes of joy and celebration above her mocking the despair that pressed in from all sides. For a long moment, she sat frozen, trembling with rage and terror. But then something inside her hardened. She would not let him win. She would not let her daughter walk blindly into a life built on lies. Her voice may have been swallowed by the basement walls, but she would find another way. Somehow, she would make the truth known. The music above grew louder. She closed her eyes, tears streaking her face, and whispered to herself, "Please, God, let her hear me." The sound of the wedding swirled above her head like a cruel reminder of everything she was missing. Voices rose in laughter, glasses clinked in toasts, and the faint chords of music shifted into something celebratory. Every sound pressed against her chest like a weight, crushing her with helplessness. Her daughter, her sweet, trusting daughter was up there, smiling in her white dress, walking into the arms of a man who had betrayed her before their vows even began. The thought made bile rise in her throat. She pulled against the ropes again, ignoring the burn of the coarse fibers against her skin. Her wrists throbbed, her breath hitched, but she didn't stop. Pain meant nothing compared to what was happening upstairs. Then, as she sat trembling in the chair, she remembered the documents. 2 weeks before the wedding, she had received an anonymous email. At first, she thought it was a mistake scans of legal papers, birth certificates, marriage records. But when she pieced them together, her blood had run cold. Her soon-to-be son-in-law already had a wife. And not just a wife, but 2 children, an entire secret family living in another state. She had confronted him the day before the wedding, hoping foolishly that shame would make him back down. Instead, his eyes had gone hard, and his smile had twisted. "If you love your daughter," he had said, "you'll stay silent. Don't ruin her big day with your bitterness." But silence wasn't in her nature. She had lived too long, seen too much, to stand by and watch her daughter walk into a nightmare. She had planned to reveal everything during the ceremony, to stop the vows before they were spoken. Now she was here, gagged by ropes and darkness, while he toasted his own lies upstairs. Her pulse quickened as she listened closer. The murmur of voices grew louder, and she could make out phrases now. "She looks beautiful," someone said. "A perfect couple," another voice chimed in. The words made her stomach twist. Lies. All of it. She screamed again, her voice raw. "Help me! Please!" But her cries only bounced off the stone walls. No footsteps rushed to her aid. No door creaked open. The laughter above continued, as if mocking her. Her mind raced. If she couldn't scream loud enough to be heard, maybe she could make noise some other way. Her eyes darted around the dim basement. Boxes, shelves, old paint cans, a rusted pipe running along the wall. She rocked her body, harder and harder, until the chair scraped against the floor. The sound was faint, but it was something. She rocked again, the legs of the chair thudding against the concrete. Louder this time, again and again. Above, the music paused for a moment. Her heart leapt. Did someone hear? Did someone notice? But then applause roared. She knew that sound. The ceremony was beginning. Tears welled in her eyes as she pictured her daughter walking down the aisle, her veil floating behind her, her heart wide open to the man waiting at the altar. And that man, her so-called husband, to be was, smiling with secrets buried deep in his chest. She had to keep fighting, her eyes fixed on the pipe overhead. If she could tip the chair far enough, maybe she could slam into it, make a noise that couldn't be ignored. She braced herself, then threw her weight to one side. The chair tipped dangerously, her heart leaping into her throat. With a loud crack, the side of the chair smashed against the pipe. The sound echoed through the basement. She froze, listening. A pause above. A murmur of confusion. Her heart raced. Maybe, just maybe, someone had heard her. But then came his voice, his smooth, calculated voice, cutting through the chatter like a blade. "Don't worry, everyone," he laughed. "Just the old house settling. Nothing to worry about." Her stomach dropped. He knew. He had heard her, and he was covering it up. Fury coursed through her veins, stronger than the ropes around her. He could silence her voice, bury her in darkness, but he couldn't erase the truth. Not forever. She threw herself against the pipe again, this time harder. Another crack echoed. Then again. The metal groaned, dust falling from the ceiling. She slammed the chair until her shoulders ached, until her wrists bled, until the sound vibrated up into the floorboards. Above, she thought she heard someone say, "What was that?" A woman's voice, her daughter's voice, hope lit in her chest like a flame. The footsteps she had prayed for light, uncertain, crossed the floor above her. She could almost see her daughter pausing, frowning, hearing the faint thuds from below. "Just the pipes, darling," the son-in-law's voice replied smoothly, calm as ever. "Don't worry about it. Come on, everyone's waiting." The footsteps moved away. Her body sagged in defeat, but only for a second. Rage clawed at her heart, fueling her again. If he thought she would give up, he was wrong. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her daughter's future, for the life she had worked so hard to protect. And she would not stop until the truth tore through the lies upstairs. The ceremony was in full swing now, and the sounds above turned into something steady and ceremonial. The chords of a piano filled the air, muffled but still haunting as they drifted through the cracks of the floorboards. The mother could almost picture it, the guests rising from their chairs, the bride stepping forward with her bouquet, the groom waiting with that polished smile that masked his rotten secrets. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her chest. She pulled against the ropes again, desperate, wild. The fibers dug deeper into her skin, sticky warmth pooling where the ropes had already cut her. Pain blurred at the edges of her mind, but she bit down on it. Pain meant nothing if it meant saving her daughter. She shifted in her chair, her body rocking violently back and forth. The wood groaned beneath her, the legs scraping against the cement. A loud thud echoed when she slammed her weight again. The sound was sharp enough to carry. She froze, panting, her ears straining. Above, the piano faltered. A voice her daughter's soft, confused floated down. "Wait, did you hear that?" Her breath caught. Yes, she heard it. But then his voice cut in, smooth and confident as ever. "Darling, it's nothing. Just the old house groaning. Don't let it ruin your day." The music resumed, but now she could sense it. A hesitation, a seed of doubt planted in her daughter's heart. That was her chance. She threw herself harder into the pipe, the impact rattling her bones. A hollow clang echoed, followed by the crash of a shelf toppling. Boxes tumbled, cans clattered across the floor. Dust choked the air, but she didn't care. The louder the chaos, the better. And then came something she hadn't expected. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, descending the stairs. Her stomach knotted. It wasn't her daughter. She knew that stride. It was him. The door creaked open, and light spilled across the basement floor, cutting through the shadows. His figure filled the doorway, sharp and menacing in his press suit. His tie hung loose, his expression tight with fury. "You just don't know when to stop, do you?" he hissed, stepping closer. She glared at him, her chest heaving. "You're a liar," she spat. "A coward. She deserves to know." He crouched beside her, his hand gripping her chin with a force that made her wince, his eyes dark, cold-locked onto hers. "If you say one word to her, if you ruin this for me, I'll make sure you never see her again. Do you understand?" Her pulse hammered in her ears, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. She will find out. One way or another, she will know who you really are. His jaw clenched, the mask slipping for a moment, revealing the panic beneath his calm exterior. He released her with a shove, standing tall again. "Pathetic," he muttered. "You think anyone will believe you? You're just bitter, alone, jealous of her happiness." Her wrists ached, Her body screamed, but her voice cut through, fierce and unwavering. I am her mother, and I will never stop protecting her. For the first time, he faltered. His eyes darted toward the ceiling, as if he feared someone had heard. Then he straightened his tie, his mask snapping back into place. Stay quiet, he ordered coldly, before retreating to the stairs. The door slammed shut, plunging her back into the dark. She slumped forward, breathless, her heart torn between despair and defiance. Upstairs, she could hear the ceremony moving forward, again the officiant's voice, the murmurs of guests, the vows beginning. Her daughter's voice rose, trembling, reciting the words she had dreamed of saying since she was a little girl. I take you to be my husband. Tears blurred the mother's eyes. The words felt like knives. Each syllable tightened the noose of betrayal around her daughter's neck. But then something changed. A pause, a hesitation. Her daughter's voice faltered. Wait, she said softly. What was that sound before? I swear I heard something. Murmurs spread among the guests. Uneasy whispers rippled through the room above. The mother's heart pounded. Yes, baby, listen. Don't ignore it. Listen. The groom's voice rose quickly, calm, controlling. Sweetheart, it's nothing. You're just nervous. Please, let's continue. But her daughter didn't speak right away. The silence stretched. The mother seized her moment. She inhaled sharply, then slammed the chair against the pipe again, harder than ever before. The clang was deafening, followed by another crash as she threw her entire weight forward, knocking over a stack of boxes. Above, the ceremony erupted in chaos. Gasps, shouts, her daughter's voice firm this time. That wasn't the house. That came from below. The officiant's voice stuttered. Guests began to rise. Her heart soared with desperate hope. Finally, she might be heard. The moment the words left her daughter's mouth, the room above seemed to fracture. The guests stirred uneasily, whispers darting like shadows through the air. A hollow silence followed, the kind that stretched and bent until it felt unbearable. Then, a chair scraped loudly against the floor, and someone muttered, "It came from downstairs. I heard it too." The groom's voice cut in, smooth but urgent now, a current of panic rippling beneath his polished tone. "Please, everyone, don't get distracted. It's an old house, it creaks. It groans. There's nothing unusual about that, but his charm, once so effortless, seemed to falter. The guests weren't convinced. The bride, their daughter, stared at him with wide eyes, her fingers trembling as they gripped her bouquet. "No," she said firmly, "that wasn't the house. It was something else." Her mother, trapped below, held her breath as footsteps thundered above her. The voices grew louder, closer. Hope surged like fire through her chest. She rocked violently in her chair, slamming the wooden legs against the cold concrete floor again and again, desperate to guide them toward her. Then, a sudden commotion. The unmistakable sound of the basement door opening. The hinges groaned as a slice of light cut down into the suffocating dark. The mother squinted, her pulse racing. At the top of the stairs stood her daughter. Still in her white dress, veil cascading around her shoulders, bouquet clutched to her chest. Her face, framed by makeup and nerves, twisted with confusion and dawning fear. "Mom?" she whispered. The word was soft, fragile, but it pierced through the mother like a knife. Her throat tightened as she cried out hoarsely, "Baby, it's me! He locked me down here! Please, you have to listen to me." The bride staggered, nearly dropping her flowers. Her eyes darted to the groom, who had followed her, his expression sharp, his hand reaching for her arm. "Don't," he hissed, his voice low but audible to those gathered near the doorway. "Don't go down there. She's confused. She's trying to ruin this day for us." The guests shifted, their unease rising. Whispers overlapped, questions buzzing in the air like angry bees. The daughter pulled her arm back, defiance flickering across her face. "Why is she tied up?" she demanded. The mother's heart raced. She knew this was her only chance. She leaned forward as far as the ropes would allow, her voice trembling but strong. "He's lying to you. He's already married, sweetheart. He has children in another state. I found the papers, the proof. That's why he wanted me out of the way. He doesn't love you, he's using you." Gasps erupted from the crowd upstairs. The bride's face went pale, her lips parting in shock. She turned to look at the man she had called her future husband, her eyes searching his face, desperate for a denial that would soothe the storm tearing through her heart. But he froze. Just for a second, a flicker of panic cracked his mask, and it was enough. The bride's bouquet slipped from her hands, petals scattering across the floor. "Is it true?" she demanded, her voice trembling with rage and grief. He stepped toward her, his hands raised as if to calm her, to weave his lies again. "Darling, listen to me. She's bitter. She's angry because I wouldn't let her control our lives. She'll say anything to destroy us. Don't let her poison what we have." But the daughter shook her head violently, her chest heaving. "Answer me," she screamed. "Are you already married?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Every guest in the room leaned forward, breath caught in their throats. The groom's jaw tightened, his lips parted, but no words came. And in that moment, the truth was no longer hidden. A murmur rose among the crowd shock, disbelief, disgust. Someone whispered, "I knew something was wrong." Another voice said, "What kind of man would do this?" The bride stumbled backward, tears streaking her cheeks, her dress billowing as she clutched the door frame for balance. Her gaze flicked to her mother below, bound and bruised but unbroken, then back to the man who had shattered her world in a single moment. "You monster," she whispered. "You tried to silence her because you knew she would tell me." The groom's mask slipped entirely then, his voice rising, desperate and harsh. "She doesn't know what she's talking about. None of you understand. This doesn't change what we have." But the guests weren't listening anymore. The room had turned against him, and he could feel it. His eyes darted wildly, calculating, searching for a way out of the tightening noose. Down below, the mother struggled against her bindings again, urgency flooding her veins. She knew it wasn't over yet. Men like him didn't crumble quietly, lashed out, and her daughter was standing directly in his reach. Her voice broke the tension like a blade. "Get away from her!" she screamed. The daughter froze, her gaze still locked on the man she had once thought was her savior. And in that frozen silence, the groom's hand twitched at his side, as if deciding whether to beg, to fight, or to flee. The air was electric, pulsing with dread. The wedding had turned into a battlefield, and the final blow had yet to fall. The air inside the hall grew heavier by the second, thick with tension, as though every wall and ceiling beam were leaning in, waiting for the moment to collapse. The bride stood frozen at the top of the basement stairs, her mother's desperate cries echoing from below, while the groom loomed beside her, his face carved with fury. Guests shifted uneasily in their chairs, the silence so taut that the faint hum of music from the abandoned sound system upstairs sounded grotesquely out of place. The groom finally snapped. With a voice stripped of charm and patience, he roared, "Enough!" The word cracked like thunder, sending several guests back in their seats. His polished, rehearsed facade was gone. The man before them wasn't the charming fiancé who had whispered promises of forever. It was someone darker, someone unmasked. "You're ruining everything," he shouted, his gaze slamming into the bride as though his fury alone could force her obedience. He stepped closer, his hand reaching for her arm again, but she recoiled, stumbling backward into the doorway. Her mother screamed from the basement, the sound hoarse but cutting through the chaos. "Don't let him touch you. He'll destroy you like he destroyed me." The bride's chest heaved as she backed away, shaking her head in disbelief. "You lied to me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You made me think you loved me. You made me believe. I do love you," the groom barked, but his voice cracked, the desperation bleeding through. "She's filling your head with poison. You're mine, and you always will be." The bride's eyes brimmed with tears. Around her, the guests began to rise, uneasy, muttering amongst themselves. Some edged toward the door, as though preparing to leave, while others leaned forward, unwilling to miss a moment of the unfolding storm. Then, in a single explosive move, the groom turned on them. "Shut up!" he snapped at the crowd, his eyes blazing, his breath ragged. "All of you get out!" His voice carried the violent authority of a man cornered, and it rippled through the guests, silencing them instantly. The bride gasped, her tears streaming now. "You're scaring me," she said, her voice trembling. From below, her mother's voice came again, fierce despite her exhaustion. "Listen to me, sweetheart. You have to be strong. He's already trapped. Mais don't let him trap you too." The groom's face twisted with rage. He whipped toward the basement door, his voice a growl. "You should have stayed silent." The bride shoved herself between him and the stairs, her dress fanning across the wooden floor, her veil trembling with each shaky breath. Her hands, trembling but determined, spread wide as though she could shield her mother with nothing but her body. "Don't you dare touch her!" she screamed. For a moment the room fell deathly still. The groom's chest rose and fell like a storm barely held at bay. His jaw clenched, and his fists balled at his sides. He looked at the bride, the woman he had almost married, and something ugly flickered in his eyes. Frustration, betrayal, and perhaps even the awareness that his game was finally over. "Do you think anyone will believe her?" he hissed, his voice sharp as broken glass. "Do you think this little scene will matter when I tell them she's insane, that she made it all up to ruin us? You'll be alone. No one will want you when this is over." The bride's lips trembled, her body shaking, but she stood her ground. "I'd rather be alone than chained to a liar," she said, her voice quivering but loud enough for the whole room to hear. The words sent a shock wave through the guests. A murmur of agreement rippled across the crowd, their pity and disgust no longer hidden. Someone whispered, "She's right." Another voice said, "This wedding is over." The groom's composure shattered completely. He lunged forward, his hands reaching for the bride's shoulders. She stumbled, gasping, but before he could tighten his grip, several guests surged forward. Two men, relatives of the bride, grabbed the groom by the arms and dragged him back, his voice erupting in curses that echoed through the hall. The bride collapsed against the wall, sobbing, her veil slipping askew. Her trembling hands reached for the basement key that dangled from the groom's pocket. With shaking determination, she pulled it free as he thrashed against the men restraining him. Her heart thundered as she rushed down the basement stairs, white skirts brushing against the wooden walls. The air below smelled of damp concrete and betrayal, but the moment she saw her mother bound in the chair, bruised and trembling, her tears blurred her vision. "Mom!" she cried, fumbling with the ropes until they fell away. The mother collapsed into her daughter's arms, sobbing against her shoulder. "I thought I'd never see you again." Above them, chaos reigned. The groom shouted, cursed, fought against the guests holding him back, but their grip only tightened. His voice, once commanding, now sounded desperate, hollow, pathetic. The bride cradled her mother, pressing her forehead to hers. "I believe you," she whispered. "I believe everything you said. He's finished." And as they climbed the stairs together, hand in hand, the hall erupted not in applause, not in cheers, but in the hushed, horrified murmurs of a wedding turned into a nightmare. The groom's fate was sealed, his lies exposed, but for the bride, one final decision still lingered in the air: whether she could find the strength to walk away from the man she once thought she loved, or whether his shadow would continue to haunt her long after the vows were broken. The wedding hall, once decorated with flowers, music, and the promise of joy, now felt like a graveyard of broken illusions. Guests whispered in clusters, their faces pale with shock, their eyes darting between the trembling bride and the restrained groom. The once pristine white aisle was now a battlefield of betrayal, the sound of sobbing replacing the celebratory laughter that should have filled the air. The bride stood at the center, her hands still clutching her mother's, their knuckles white with desperation and relief. She could feel her mother's trembling body pressed against hers, the weight of suffering evident in every shallow breath. The ropes that had bound her mother still lay coiled on the floor at their feet, physical proof of the cruelty that had been hidden in plain sight. Her mother's voice, hoarse but resolute, broke through the stunned silence. "You see what kind of man he is. You see what he's capable of. Don't let his lies poison your life the way they poisoned mine." The bride's lips trembled as she looked at her mother, then at the man who had nearly become her husband. His once confident smirk was gone, replaced by wild eyes and a desperate, twitching sneer. He thrashed against the men holding him, his voice ragged with rage. "She's manipulating you!" he shouted, spittle flying from his lips. "She always hated me, always wanted to tear us apart. You think she's innocent? She's lying to you. She's always lying." The words sliced through the hall, but they no longer carried the power they once had. The bride, who had once clung to his promises, now saw them for what they truly were: empty weapons designed to control her. She took a trembling step forward, her veil slipping further, her gown stained from the struggle. "Stop," she whispered, her voice cracking but loud enough to silence him. "Stop lying. I heard her from the basement. I saw the ropes. I saw what you did with my own eyes. You don't love me. You never loved me. You only wanted control." The groom's face contorted, rage flashing across his features. But before he could spit another venomous word, one of the guest's family friend, older, with eyes full of disappointment, stepped forward. His voice was steady and firm. "This ends now. You're not a man, you're a coward." Others nodded, their voices joining in agreement. The tide had turned. Where once the groom had charmed and deceived, now he stood exposed, his crimes illuminated under the harsh light of truth. The bride's knees buckled, and she sank into a chair, still holding her mother's hand as though it were the only anchor in a storm. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't care. She had seen his true face, and there was no going back. Her mother gently brushed the wet strands of hair from her forehead, whispering through her own tears, "You're free now, sweetheart. It's over. He can't hurt you anymore." But the bride wasn't sure. Deep in her chest, fear lingered. She looked at him again, the man who had promised her forever, now restrained, cursing, his voice cracking with desperation. She wondered if she would ever truly be free of him, or if his shadow would follow her long after this day. The police arrived soon after, called quietly by one of the guests during the chaos. Their uniforms and steady presence cut through the tension as they stepped into the hall. The groom fought violently against their grip, shouting the bride's name as though invoking it might save him. But his words fell on deaf ears. His wrists were bound in cold steel, his voice muffled as they dragged him away. The bride watched, her tears blurring the image of him being hauled from the hall, but she felt no satisfaction, only a hollow emptiness where love had once lived. The guests began to leave, murmuring their farewells, their eyes filled with pity. The flowers wilted in the heat of the lamps, the cake stood untouched, the music long since silenced. What was supposed to be the happiest day of her life had become a nightmare, one she would never forget. As the hall emptied, only she and her mother remained. The older woman leaned heavily on her, her body weakened by the hours of captivity, but her spirit still sharp, still burning. "You have a choice now," she whispered, her voice low and fragile. "You can let this break you, or you can rise above it. Don't let him steal more than he already has." The bride pressed her forehead to her mother's, her tears falling silently. She felt the truth in those words. The decision was hers, whether to let this betrayal define her or to rebuild from the ashes. As they left the hall together, the night air wrapped around them, cool and cleansing. The distant wail of sirens faded as the police car disappeared into the dark, carrying her would-be husband and his lies into the void. But even as the stars glittered above, she knew her heart would carry scars. Scars that might never fully heal. And yet, with her mother's hand in hers, she felt something stir in the hollow space left behind, the faint, fragile flicker of strength. Because this wasn't the end, it was the beginning of her life without him. The night air clung to her skin, damp with the remnants of storm clouds, but to the bride, it felt like a baptism. She inhaled deeply, her lungs aching but filling with a freedom she had not known since meeting him. Beside her, her mother leaned on her arm, still frail from her ordeal in the basement, but her eyes burned with defiance, unwilling to let cruelty break her spirit. They walked slowly away from the hall, the last echoes of shattered vows and whispered gossip trailing behind them like ghosts. Every step forward felt heavy, like walking through mud, but it also carried a strange lightness, as if the ground beneath her feet was reclaiming her from the prison of lies she had nearly stepped into forever. The bride stopped under a street lamp, the light casting a pale glow on her ruined wedding dress. The lace was torn, stained with dust and sweat, the veil hanging limply by a few threads. It looked nothing like the dream she had once imagined. She stared at her reflection in a nearby glass window, and for the first time, she didn't see a bride. She saw a survivor. Her mother's voice broke the silence. "You don't have to carry this alone. You never did." The bride turned, her eyes brimming with tears. "But I almost gave him everything. I almost married him. I ignored the signs, and I let him hurt you." Her voice cracked, shame dripping into every syllable. Her mother cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet her gaze. "No, sweetheart. That's what they wanted for you, to feel weak, to feel guilty, to feel like you're nothing without them. But you saw the truth, even if it came at the last possible moment. You saved yourself. And you saved me." The words washed over her like a balm, soothing the jagged edges of her pain. Still, inside her chest, the war raged on. She could hear his voice in her mind, his sweet promises, his charming lies, the way he had once made her believe she was the center of his universe. That voice was poison, but it still echoed. She clenched her fists, the decision pressing heavily against her ribs. If she chose to forgive, to cling to the fantasy of who he had pretended to be, she would forever live in chains. If she chose to walk away, she would lose the illusion of love, but she might finally gain herself. Closing her eyes, she whispered to the night, "I choose me." Her mother's lips curved into a trembling smile, and she pulled her daughter into her arms. They clung to each other under the pale light, the bond between them reforged by fire and betrayal. Back at the hall, the remnants of the ruined ceremony lingered. Guests would go home and tell the story again and again, their voices dripping with shock, their faces lit with morbid fascination. But for the bride, this was no gossip tale. It was the ashes of her life as she had known it. And now she had to build something new from those ashes. The following days were not easy. The newspapers whispered about the scandal. The recordings of her fiancé's past deceit spread through hushed conversations in town, and every time she passed someone on the street, she could feel their eyes following her. But instead of shrinking, she lifted her head higher. Instead of silence, she spoke her truth. Her ex-fiancé's face appeared once in a news report as he was led into court, his eyes still burning with rage, but his voice silenced by the weight of his crimes. The woman he had nearly broken stood tall, hand in hand with her mother, unflinching in the face of the world's judgment. One evening, weeks after the wedding that never was, she sat at her mother's kitchen table, sipping tea. The house was warm, filled with laughter again, the kind of laughter that comes only after survival. She realized then that love was not what he had given Harriet, was what she and her mother had carried all along. Her gown, now cleaned but forever marked by the stains of that night, hung at the back of her closet. She had thought about throwing it away many times, but something inside her refused. Not because she wanted to remember the pain, but because it reminded her of the moment she had chosen freedom over illusion, and that choice, that final decision, was the beginning of everything. She would never forget the darkness of that basement, the sound of ropes tightening around her mother's wrists, or the lies dripping from her fiancé's lips. But she would also never forget the strength that rose in her chest when she said no, when she walked away, when she chose herself and her family. And in that choice, she found something greater than love. She found power. Her story would be remembered not as the tale of a ruined wedding, but as the day a bride refused to be broken. Because sometimes the most important vows are not the ones spoken at an altar, but the ones we make to ourselves.